Today we're getting under the hood of Superwoman Syndrome with Dr. Tracee Burroughs-Gardner, a psychiatrist. She's also the CEO of Urban Behavioral Associates and the creator of Urban Wellness Society. How do I even know if I have Superwoman Syndrome or if I'm just ambitious?
Great question. And the reality of it is, a lot of people who are ambitious also end up with Superwoman Syndrome, right? So I think we probably first need to just define what Superwoman Syndrome is and how it differs from just being an ambitious, hardworking woman. So when we think about Superwoman Syndrome, what it means is that it's this drive, this urge, this belief that not only do you have to excel in what you're doing, but that you have to carry the entirety of everything on your shoulders. Your family, your community, your environment is all on your shoulders. So the difference between that and just kind of ambition, right? When we think about ambition, it's saying, I want my career to be high power. I want whatever my values are to drive forward. It's a very person-centered philosophy if we're talking about ambition. But Superwoman Syndrome says, I've got to take care of everybody. I've got to take care of my family. I've got to take care of my community. I've got to take care of my coworkers. I've got to take care of my friends. I must do everything. And it's more external centered as opposed to internal centered. Now, again, people that are ambitious often tend to end up with Superwoman Syndrome because often the person that is ambitious may be one of the few, if not the only, in their family circle or in their cultural circle or community circle to have excelled. And it's that ambition that pushes them to excel, right? But that excelling is what puts them in the spotlight of saying, wow, Tracee's really mastered all of this. So can you help? I need a few dollars. Can you help? I need some place to stay. Can you help? This person really needs to talk. Can you help? Can you help? Because you've shown that you're the successful one. And then that kind of all starts to pile on top of each other.
Why do I feel guilty anytime I slow down?
Because we believe that it's our job to carry everything. And when we talk about this belief, we have to recognize that this is not just kind of one layer. This normally has been passed down from generation to generation to generation to generation. And we see it throughout every culture, throughout every community. So if I talk about the culture where I find myself sitting, right, a Black woman in America, we talk about Big Mama, the matriarch of the family, the grandmother who we look up to, we revere, we put her on a pedestal. She is amazing. But what we have learned from her is that it is your job to carry the family. It is your job to carry the community. And somehow, if we feel tired, right, if we feel like we need to slow down, we feel guilty because then we're not holding up what our expectations are. We're not being, and I have come to detest this phrase, we're not being a strong Black woman. We're not doing what we're supposed to do because our community has taught us that it's our job. So when we start to listen to the internal cues telling us, hey, I need a break, I'm tired, we feel guilty about that. Not only because has our communities and our culture made us believe that it's the highest calling to carry everyone, we also start to feel guilty because we see what people have sacrificed. We see the women that have come before us that have broken all of those glass ceilings. And now we feel, well, I can't not do all of this because I have opportunities that my mothers and my grandmothers and my great grandmothers never had. So how can I turn down this job position? How can I turn down this volunteer position? How can I not help in my community when all of these people sacrifice so much for me to be able to do this? But I'm guilty because I'm tired and I need a break. So that's why we feel guilty when we get the urge to slow down, but we feel like we shouldn't. That at some point the burnout overrides the guilt, right? And so either the emotional and mental burnout override the guilt and we must stop, or the physical manifestations of the burnout override the guilt and we are forced to stop. And the catch 22 with that is that when we do stop, then we're still not able to carry everything for anybody anyway. So it kind of is in everybody's best interest for us to learn how to balance those things.
Is it actually possible to say no without damaging relationships?
The very short yet long answer to that is it depends. It depends on what you're saying no to, and it depends on the relationship. And it depends on how often you've been saying yes when you haven't wanted to say yes. So the reality of it is when we start to take the S off of our chest, as we like to call it, there will be some relational damage. There just will be, especially when you have been placed in the role of being the superwoman or superhero for your entire community. And when you become the go-to person, oh, I know I can call Tracee. She'll get those flyers done for me. I know I need them by tomorrow at 6 a.m. and it's 10 p.m., but she'll do it. Oh, I'll call Elizabeth. She'll get those cookies sold for us. I know she's got a full work day and she's got all this stuff to do, but she'll do it. And as soon as we start to say, I can't do it, there will be some resentment. There will be some animosity because we have allowed the role to be created of being the fixer. And that's the thing about Superwoman Syndrome, that part of it is a role that we put the S on. We were given the S. Culturally and historically, we were told to wear the S, but we also took the S. And there's a lot of psychological reasons why we took that S. But as soon as we start to tell people that, hey, these things you used to be able to quote unquote rely on me for, you no longer can, people will start to feel upset. Now, our belief and our hope is that if people love us, they will respect it. And even if they're temporarily bothered, the relationship will still be intact. The reality of it is, though, that may not always be the case. So then we're left in a very challenging position of saying, okay, is that relationship worth salvaging in its iteration how it is, even though it's possibly destroying me? That's a tough place to be in. It's very easy for me to sit in this seat and say, no, you should never do that. It's very difficult when it's your brother that the relationship is with, or your mother, or your child that the relationship is with, and you're having to say, guys, I can't do it. I just can't. So, can you say no and not damage relationships? Maybe. But I think the bigger question is, how do you navigate through relationships changing when you start presenting yourself in a different format? And it makes sense as I'm thinking about this, it makes sense that the relationship would change because you're now presenting a different person. You're presenting a different person. And that's not a bad thing, but it can be challenging. A really actually great point that when we start to say no to some things and we start to present in a different way, hopefully a better way, the people that love us actually get more of us. They get a better part of us. We're not exhausted. We're not resentful. We're not irritable. We're at our best selves. So those people that are still in our lives actually get a better form of us. And they like us more, and we like ourselves more, and it's ultimately a better relationship. No does not have to be an active, aggressive, in your face, king of the hill. No, that's my purse. Like, it doesn't have to be that yelling no. It can be more of a, you know what, I'm just going to protect my peace with this one. When you get that phone call, Johnny got arrested again. I'm sorry to hear that. I hope everything works out okay. Good night. Or we don't know where we're going to host Thanksgiving dinner this year. Well, when you all figure that out, please let me know. I am happy to bring the sweet potato pie. It can be just like that. No, love to tell the story. I might, and I joke about this now with my husband, but we had fallen into a very bad habit that I was the pizza orderer in our relationship. It didn't matter what was going on. I was the pizza orderer, though we both had smartphones and we both had the app on our phone. And we knew it had gotten bad when I was in a different state and he called me to ask me to order his pizza. I said, okay, this has got to stop. So I remember one day he was watching football. It was football Sunday. And he said, Tracee, I'd love some pizza. And I'm like, yeah, that sounds great. Order me a pepperoni. I'm not doing that. And I didn't actively say, I'm not ordering your pizza. But he looked at me a little bizarre, a little crazy for a second. But then he picked up his phone and he ordered the pizza. Now, do I still order pizzas? Of course, I still order pizzas, but setting that boundary that I don't have to be the Domino's diva. We can all order pizza. It's okay. So that's an example, a silly one though it may be, of saying no without it having to be active and aggressive. And sometimes we get so afraid of setting the boundary that we start to make up catastrophic outcomes that are not going to be there. Right. So the first time I didn't order the pizza, of course, well, oh my gosh, is he going to get upset? Is this not going to be an argument? And it wasn't. He just ordered the pizza. It wasn't that big of a deal. So sometimes, we have to allow the people in our lives to love us and say, okay, you don't want to carry that burden? I've got it. Don't worry about it. And then if they don't, then we can deal with that. Then we can deal with the potential relationship damage. But sometimes there's no damage.
What happens to my brain and body if I keep pushing at this pace?
Breakdown. You'll break down. So mentally, you'll start to have breakdown, mental fog, cognitive changes, anxiety, depression, resentment. Resentment will start to build. You will start to pull away from those people that you feel are adding to your burden. So relationship changes happen, isolation happens. So there's all those mental and emotional pieces, but physically, we will start to break down. We will get physical fatigue. We will get weakness. We will get immune system changes. There is a growing school of thought that autoimmune disorders are on the rise because we're seeing elevated stress levels, particularly in women. Now, I don't know where all of the research stands on that, to be perfectly honest, but it does make sense that if we are under long-term, heavy, undue stress, it will impact our immune systems. So we will have mental problems, mental impact, social and relational impact, physical impact if we keep pushing. So that's why it's not a luxury to say no. It's not a luxury to take the S off or to shrink the S. I love that piece where sometimes it's just a little S. We can still carry a little S. It's okay. It's okay because the reality of it is, and I think I alluded to this before, is that Superwoman Syndrome is a thing in part because we allow it to be a thing, because in part it feeds a piece of our identity, right? It feeds a piece of our identity. It feeds a piece of who we are. It feeds a piece of what we believe things should be. So we may not take everything off, but there is impact when we don't slow it down to a place that works for us.
Why do I always feel like I'm not doing enough, even when I'm exhausted?
Yep. Because of that belief that we're always supposed to be doing more. I'm going to go back to Big Mama, right? The Big Mama who cooked I don't know if you've ever seen the movie Soul Food, right? It was a movie, I think from the 90s. I may be dating myself. And she always made these elaborate Sunday dinners. Every Sunday. It was what I would consider to be Thanksgiving dinner. But every Sunday they made these elaborate dinners. And somehow that got woven into the psyche that that's what was supposed to happen. And if you're not cooking these elaborate Sunday dinners every Sunday, you are a failure. You are not good enough as a wife, a mother, a grandmother, etc. So that's an example of why we feel like we're not doing enough, even though we're exhausted. We've worked 40, 50, 60 hours a week. We've cared for the children. We've cared for elderly parents or aunts or uncles, but somehow we still feel compelled to make a 5-course Sunday dinner, even though we are exhausted. It's somehow this deep-seated belief that we're supposed to do more. And I've talked a lot about kind of ethnic cultural things, but let's not discount the societal impact of this hustle culture that we're in now. You're supposed to do more, do more, do more. I think at one point people were saying, I'll sleep when I'm dead. I'll sleep when I'm dead. I grind till I die. What are you doing? This is crazy. I remember saying to a colleague one time, I said, oh my gosh, I've been doing so much work. I'm not getting much sleep. Now, I was saying it as if it was a problem. She looked at me and said, yeah, I know, right? No, that's a problem. We should not be doing all of this. So we've got all of these cultural beliefs, either societal or familial or ethnic beliefs that tell us you've got to do more, you've got to do more. But the problem is it's never enough. There's never an end to the doing more. There's just always more that gets added to the plate. As you're talking, yes. So if you've got that little girl who feels like she was never good enough, right? This also starts to tie into imposter syndrome. She was never good enough. She was never smart enough, even though she may have been a brilliant little girl. She was never seen. She was never heard. You start to get this internal drive that if I just work harder, if I just do more, then I'll be valued. Then they'll finally love me. then I will finally have earned whatever it is I'm attempting to earn. So, yes, there is absolutely a psychological component to this drive to always not only be better and be the best, because that is part of it, but it's being the best, but also carrying everything for everybody. Because if I can do this, if I can rescue everybody, if I can be there for everybody, then finally they will value me, which we know just doesn't work.
Is perfectionism something I can truly unlearn, or is it part of who I am?
Um, Real perfection, well, yes and no, right? I'm a psychiatrist. Yes and no. So some people are just inherently personality driven to be perfectionists. They were that way from the womb. They wanted to crawl perfectly at 3 months old. They've just been perfectionists from the start. So can individuals like that unlearn perfectionism? Maybe not. Then you've got another group that kind of ties into what we were talking about earlier that have developed perfectionistic traits because they are trying to be something or feel something. Then maybe you can unlearn that perfectionism. But I guess for me, whether you can learn it or unlearn it is not even necessarily the question. The better question is, can we learn to manage it and balance it? Because perfectionism or the desire for perfection is not a bad thing. I'm going to say that again. The desire for perfection is not inherently a bad thing. The problem comes in when we believe that perfection must happen at the expense of everything. At all costs, perfection must happen because that's not realistic. So I think the question is how to appreciate good, how to say, wow, I've achieved, how to say, wow, I have done this for my family and friends and community, and this is good enough. Whether it's good enough forever or good enough for this moment, I think that's the key. Not to get rid of perfectionism, but to not let perfectionism drive your entire life. So that can be learned, yes.
How do I make time for myself without feeling selfish?
Um, it's hard, especially because the selfish feeling is driven by deep seated embedded messages and beliefs. So the first thing is a lot of self talk, recognizing that feeling of being selfish is going to come up. Yep, it's just recognizing you are going to feel like you're being selfish. And as soon as that feeling starts to come up, challenge it, like that CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy premise, identify it, challenge it, dispute it. You're being, again, the family called and said they needed a place to host Thanksgiving. The last 5 times I hosted Thanksgiving, they broke my furniture. I don't want them in my house anymore, but I feel selfish and guilty for saying no. Okay, that's not selfish for saying I don't want my furniture broken again and no one helped replace it. So I'm going to say no, and that's okay. But it's a lot of self talk. You're not being selfish, you're not being selfish, you're not being selfish. The second thing is to surround yourself with people who reinforce that positive message. And oftentimes it may not be family, it may not be certain friend circles. It may be developing a new social network. And I think maybe in other conversations we've had, we've talked about the benefits of sister circles that will tell you, girl, tell those people no, it's okay. You deserve to take a break. You deserve to not run down there and fix the situation that you didn't cause. You're not being selfish. Sometimes you need that person to tell you you're not being selfish. One of my very, very good girlfriends had to do that with me last week. Something had come up, a request was being made of me that I just was not able to do without a lot of challenging mental gymnastics and time gymnastics, and it would have just been horrible. And as I was talking to her, I said, Alicia, my friend is Alicia, I said, I feel so guilty. And she said, Tracee, why? Don't. And just hearing that from her actually helped me to feel so much better. Okay, I don't need to feel guilty about that. So having a circle, surrounding yourself with people that reinforce the message and continuing to remind yourself self-care and putting up boundaries is not a bad thing. It's not a selfish thing. I don't owe people all of me, and that's okay.
Why do I get resentful when others don't pull their weight, but I still won't let go of control?
Yeah. So we get resentful because, on one hand, we believe that there's a right way to do things. There's a right way that things should be done. And if we all just did our part, it would be right. And we get frustrated and resentful when we see people not doing it. And it's so interesting because we're seeing that as we talk about these intergenerational conversations, because younger women, the younger millennials and Gen Z, I believe, are very much saying, not doing it. I'm not doing it. I don't want to do it. I don't feel like I need to do it. It does not align with my personal values. I'm not doing it. Whereas older women, Gen X and older, feel very resentful about that. No, you have to do it, even though it's killing us. We don't want to do it either. But we're resentful because we feel like you should be doing the same thing I did. We should both have the same struggle. That's part of it. But then because we want it done the right way, we have a belief that we are the only ones that know how to do it the right way. So even if they were to pick up the mantle, we're not going to let it go. And we are also seeing that with intergenerational conversations, as we're seeing kind of our, what do they call it, the boomer generation and older who are not letting go of things, not doing generational handoffs the way that some may think they should, because even though they're tired and they're exhausted and they're resentful that you young people aren't doing it, I also can't let it go because I want it done right. And I want it done right because I value. So it's not just control for the sake of control. We get resentful and we don't let it go because it means so much to us. We value it so highly, whatever it is. If it's the family, if it's an organization, if whatever it is, we value it so highly that we want it done the right way. But we're resentful that we feel like we have to be the ones to do it. I mean, we could talk at length about the generational differences and why younger women feel the freedom to say no, in part because they have not been given the pressure of I sacrificed this so that you could do this. They are coming up in a world where options are abundant. Whereas we came up in a world where, yeah, options were starting to happen, but the women that fought and died for those options were still there sitting and telling us, hey, these were earned. And so you've got to do something with them versus, like I said, younger women. And I applaud them for it, saying, hey, no, of course I can do this. Of course I can be CEO of a company. Why can't I? Of course I can have a family and do that. Why can't I? And so they have some freedoms. Now you could argue that there's sometimes you miss something when you don't fully recognize the struggle that has gone into acquiring it. But again, just some of the reasons behind the generational differences.
How do I know the difference between healthy drive and harmful overfunctioning?
Yeah. The first thing is, do you have peace? Drive while we may get tired, that may happen. There should be an ultimate sense of peace about what you're doing versus harmful overfunctioning, which brings um, emotional drain and fatigue, that burnout, um, resentment, that emotional piece, that emotional component of it that takes away your peace. Harmful overfunctioning normally brings with it guilt and feeling like you're doing things from obligation. And again, we all have to do things we don't always want to do. That's just life, that's reality. But if you feel like the entire path, if you feel like the goal is an obligatory goal, that's a problem. Then you might be in harmful overfunctioning. Um, Healthy drive allows time for rest. Healthy drive allows you to listen to the signals telling you, I need to take a break. If it's a 1 hour break, a 1 day break, a 1 week break. Healthy drive allows you to pay attention to your signals. And healthy drive, you don't feel like you're being taken advantage of, via, as opposed to that harmful over functioning, which we see in Superwoman Syndrome, often leads to feeling like you're being taken advantage of.
What's the first step toward living without this constant pressure?
The first step is recognizing that you're under constant pressure, and that's deceptively difficult because sometimes when our whole reality is constant pressure and everyone we know is in the same space, it feels like that's what it's supposed to be. So the first step is recognizing, hey, I'm in a pressure cooker here. Something's going to blow. The second, part two of the first step, is then giving yourself permission to do something different. Until you give yourself permission to do something different, nothing different can happen. And so whenever I talk to women or I work with women that are looking to make life change, that's really the first part that we focus on. Identifying where you are and giving yourself permission to do something different. A lot of times people, when they're trying to make life changes, they focus on the change. Okay, we're going to change this and we're going to change that. But until you allow yourself to believe it's okay to make the change, you're never going to make the change. You will also have this, always have this horribly heavy S seared onto your chest until you allow yourself to say, you know what, I don't have to carry the S. Or I don't have to carry the S in its current format. I can carry part of the S. I can carry none of the S. I can carry the S for a little while, take it off, and then put it back on. The S is mine. It's not a burden that's been given to me. It's almost an honor that I can choose to use how I choose to use it. So those are the first steps, recognizing it and then giving yourself permission to do something different.
What are your top 5 tips for women experiencing Superwoman Syndrome?
So again, the identifying that it's there, the allowing yourself to believe that you don't have to be Superwoman, really recognizing what the S feeds in you, okay, because the S does feed something, and then then really starting to restructure, okay, what part of this S do I want to put down? Because again, you probably won't put it all down. And you may pick pieces back up. But which pieces do I want to let go of? Which pieces do I want to put down? And then that goes into kind of, what can I delegate? What can I delay? What can I delete? What can I just do? How do I restructure things so that I'm functioning in a way that's good for me, which is then ultimately good for my family and my community, and not just doing what people are telling me is my responsibility to do.